Okay, here we are, part two. We are talking about standards, objectives, and goals. So I'm going to flip forward to where we left off. And we're going to talk a little bit about academic standards. Academic standards are there to ensure that we are having the highest quality instructional practices in our classroom. So Colorado has some state standards. There's a searchable database of all content areas, and further down in the goodie bag you'll see a link to the Colorado state standards, and you can go check those out. Those are preschool through 12th grade, so they are meant to be along the continuum of children's educational experiences. We also, here is the state standards website, a little bit about what it looks like, just a quick screenshot, but you can certainly go there and should check out more. They have many areas, all areas really of development that they cover. We also have Colorado Early Learning and Development Guidelines developed by the Office of Early Childhood in conjunction with early childhood professionals across the whole state. So there was a whole commission brought together that included teachers, both public and private, as well as many other people in the field. There's also a link to this at the end of the goodie bag as well. So I want you to we're now onto the planning phase of our cycle. So we talked a little bit about standards, and now I want to think about how we plan our lessons. And so thinking about interest areas, invitations, activities. So we're going to look at a few images of high quality practices. So you can see in this classroom, this is a little bit older of a classroom. This is a elementary school environment, but it doesn't look at all like an elementary school environment, does it? It looks like your home. I would love to have this reading nook in my home. I would cozy up with books all day long. So thinking about how we set up the environment to invite children to engage in the kind of activities. And then you see behind here, this little writing center, how organized and inviting. I can't tell you how many classrooms I go into, and the markers and the crayons and the glue and everything is just kind of scattershot and thrown around, and it's really hard to want to engage in an environment that is not neat, clean, and organized. And this classroom really just is the gold standard for that. Here, look at this block area and how science focused it is, where children can run balls through a tube and think about trajectory and gravity and all sorts of physics terms. We have here a little intentional science activity connected to the book Mouse Paint. Again, look at how inviting that is. And eyedroppers and colored water for the children to drop into this jar. I'm pointing to the screen to the jar that you can't see me point. I mean, you can see my hand, but you can't see me physically pointing. I should just use the mouse. Right here, this jar where you can see they've dropped little bits of color in here, and they can start to see how those colors bleed together, just like in that book, Mouse Paint. We have here some really beautiful science area images and engagement. So when designing activities, intentional teachers choose developmentally appropriate activities. They don't choose things that are too far from where the students have been, that's too easy for them, and they don't pick things that are too far ahead that will make them feel frustrated. I talked about this in another screencast, that my 7-year-old daughter might enjoy spending not even 30 seconds with a baby toy that she might find, or a toddler toy. And then she moves on and she's over it, even though she's like, oh, I love this thing and I want to keep it forever. Really, that's not where she's at as a 7-year-old, and it's frequently dropped and moved on right away. So if our environments do not have the materials and the intentionality to take children to the next level that they're at, we'll see a lot of disengagement and unwanted behavior. So the National Association for the Education of Young Children, we have talked about NACE before. We're going to go to their website, and we're going to talk about the 12 principles that inform practice. And let's see if I can get my link to work. Is it going to go? Here we go. I think it's going now. There we are. So this, we talked about ECE before. You can go to their website and check it out. If you search NAEYC 12 principles, this will be your first hit on Google. It comes up so fast. So these are really, really, really important 12 principles that inform of child development and learning that inform our practice. These are our guidelines of developmentally appropriate practice. That all areas of development and learning are important. No one is more important than another. Sure, we spend a ton of time on social emotional stuff in early childhood classrooms. That's really important. However, just as important is the time we spend on math and teaching counting and one-to-one correspondence and here's a word for you, subitizing. Love that word. I will digress quickly and tell you what it means. To subitize is to know how many things are in a group without counting. So just to pick up something that's on my table right in front of me, I can look at this and go 2. I don't have to go 1, 2. Now I know it's 2. I can just look at it and go, that's 2. I just subitized. Fascinating. Anyway, math is just as important as social emotional, and reading is just as important, and so on and so forth. That learning and development follow a predictable sequence. Now, even though it follows a predictable sequence, we can sometimes see regression in a child. Dr. Barry Brazelton has taught us that that is normal. Regression is normal, and if we go with the child on that regression, they will jump back up to where they were. However, if we do not meet the child where they have regressed, they will move forward much more slowly. Development and learning proceed at varying rates, so it's a little bit about what I said about you can regress, and also some children speed forward and then plateau. Some children predictably crawl along, some children just speed, just different rates, and we have to accept that. That development and learning result from the interplay between getting older and the experiences that they have. That's really important. They have to have environments that let them experience the world so that they can develop at the rate that they are naturally inclined to. Children can be diagnosed with disabilities because their environment did not set them up to be able to engage in things as the window opens. So a great example is a movie called Nell that has Jodie Foster in it. It might have been 20 years ago or so that it came out. It was quite a while ago. Nell is a fascinating story. It's based on a true story. Really interesting movie about a girl who grew up with no other human contact other than her mother. And her language is really different and delayed and stunted, as well as the way she thinks about and sees the world. She appears to be stuck at some very young age, and she was studied by linguists. So again, because her environment didn't foster the language development, she did not develop language and other skills the way most adults would. Development proceeds toward greater complexity, self-regulation, and symbolic or representational capacities. Really that everything moves forward more and more deeply, and it builds and it builds and it builds. But if you miss something in the foundation, the rest can't be built. So that's, again, why I talked about meeting regression is really important. But you can't expect a child to do multiplication when they haven't learned addition. No one would ever do that. So sometimes with, say, social emotional stuff, we expect children to take turns or share when they haven't had enough time to develop that experience and figure out what that looks like. So children develop less when they have secure and I would say loving relationships. Sort of feels like a no-brainer. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir about that one. Development and learning, number 8, occur when they are influenced by multiple social and cultural contexts. That children develop most deeply when the complexity of the world all comes at them. They are designed to deal with that, to crave it, to need it. So that's a really important aspect. Number 9 might be my favorite. Children learn in a variety of ways. We cannot underestimate the importance of that we are so complex. Think about yourself, and sometimes you're like, this person just doesn't know me. And why do we feel that way? Because they expect us to behave differently or think differently or act differently or look differently or smell differently or whatever. And children are the same, that they learn in so many different ways. And there's so many factors. There's multiple intelligence and temperament and personality type and learning style and in so many things that just create the you that is uniquely you for all of us. And so we need to make sure our environments make up for that. Play is the most important vehicle for developing in every way. Number 10, just everything comes through play. And you know what? Even for adults, that oftentimes our work becomes play. And that play is how we all get to be our most evolved self. Number 11, that development and learning advance when children are challenged. And I will add the caveat here of challenged just the right amount. If we set the goal way too high, they're not going to get there. So let's use that multiplication and addition example I used before. If we say to a kindergartner, you need to do multiplication today, they're going to check out. That's not the right challenge. But if we say, well, you know what 2 plus 2 is, and they say, yeah, it's 4, then we can say, yeah, another way to say that is 2 times 2, 2 twice, 2 times 2 is 4. So we're setting the foundation of that, understanding multiplication. I don't expect them to take a multiplication test to get out of kindergarten, but I can start connecting those dots for them early and often. I'll tell a quick story here. I was out to breakfast yesterday with my daughter, and we played a game, and we had to add up the number of boxes that each of us had to see who won the game. So she counted her boxes, and she had 9, I think, and I counted my boxes, and I had, I think, 16. And so it was obvious I won, and then I started saying, well, let's figure out the percentages. She's like, oh, what? So I got to talk about percentage. Percent means per 100 from 100. So if we had 100 boxes, this many would be mine and this many would be yours. And we did the math and we got to start talking about that. Again, I don't expect her to start doing percentages at 7 years old, but I can start making those concepts for her and challenge her thinking a little bit so that she's ready to move to the next level when that comes. And lastly, number 12, children's experiences shape their motivation and approaches to learning. Basically, what we all experience in the world shapes how we feel about the world and how we respond to our learning environments. So when designing activities, intentional teachers balance adult and child-led experiences. So we're going to look at a little bit of this. So here, and feel free to pause these as you'd like so you can look more deeply, we have a comparison of a teacher-directed and a child-directed experience. The teacher-directed was probably a small group, and the children were asked to draw their self-portraits. Maybe they had mirrors or pictures of themselves to use. In this bottom one, this is child-directed, where the child drew a self-portrait without any prompting and used the materials that were available during choice time. This might be because they drew a self-portrait in another experience and they wanted another chance, or this just might be because they just wanted to draw themselves. Again, balance of teacher and child-directed. On the bottom corner, a child made a pattern using the materials available in the science area. Up here, there's a teacher-directed activity where they asked children to sort counting bears, and this child sorted in a certain way. It can be open-ended when it's teacher-directed. It should be open-ended, but it's a provocation. It's a prompt set up by the teacher. Intentional teachers integrate content areas, that they don't leave things isolated and siloed. They pull things together. So an integrated curriculum has a topic that the children love, and it's a schedule that's planned, and there's lots of resources gathered and many facets that come into that. And so we have reached the end of our discussion, and we're going to come back to this cycle that we have here. And we covered all of these except for observation and assessment, because we covered that in an earlier week. So hopefully you got deeper into this and feel like you better understand the cycle of planning and curriculum to create the best possible environments for children.